Okay, so we're going to talk in this session about polling in general. And there's not many people here, so just jump in and say something at any point, and feel free to stop me at any point, whatever. But one of the things we're going to do is actually try some polling just to see how it works. I use slides I put together in January, and apparently I forgot to update this, but what I'm going to ask you to do is actually join iClicker and try it. You can do this either from a mobile device or you could do it on your computer. Since we're doing this over Zoom, what I should probably do, I thought I had updated this, or maybe I just grabbed the wrong slides, but that's okay. We'll just assume this is full. And let me go to the chat. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. It's been a long week. So if you go there, you'll be able to sign up for an account, but sign up for a student account. And that we'll use as we go through it, just so you can see what it's like from the student side. And I'll be showing my screen, which will show you what it's like from the instructor side. And so actually, let's actually try that. Let me know when you get your account set up. And with iClicker, you can use it either as an app on a smartphone, or you could use it just from a web browser. And so you could open up a tab on your computer, hop there and set it up there. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to activate it here so you can see what it looks like from the instructor side. I have this already installed on my computer. So all I have to do is go to iClicker, which is right there. And here I have 2 workshops. This is my spring class, which is over now, but I set this session up for actually just a few days starting here. And I'm going to click on Start Class, and here's where all the work gets done. As an instructor, what happens is you have this as an overlay on your screen, and any questions you have, you just put them in your slides. It could be in a PowerPoint, it could be a Word document. You could type them on, you could type them in Notepad and share the screen with people. And so whatever is in here becomes your question. And so let's just say, let me fix this while you're
John, I can't seem to get in. I keep getting that my search came up with nothing. So it's TDLLU.
TDLLU.
Yeah.
What I did,
instruct.
I just clicked the copy and just put it into the search, and then it had me create an account.
I was trying to do it from on my phone.
Oh, gotcha. I did it from the computer.
Oh, well, you know what you could do then? You could you have an Android or an iPhone?
iPhone.
Okay, just go to the App Store and download iClicker Student.
Got it.
And then when you're asked for a section, sign up, and you should see this. It might ask you, it'll ask you what institution first, and then it will ask you, I think it will ask you for the name of the instructor. And then if you choose my name, you'll see this as one of the options, and just join it with that. And that should bring you right to there.
Okay, that was much easier.
Oh, Shane, before I forget, you need to write home form, or you can.
In all of our classrooms, iClicker is installed. You have to sign into your accounts. They had to do some interesting programming to get that to work, because it's really designed to be run off of a single computer. But what they've done basically is they set it up so it automatically downloads and installs, and then you just log in and you can do it from any of the podium computers in any of the classrooms. But if you're using your own computer, you just download the app from iClicker, and then you just have it there. And once you sign into your account, and if you're on your own computer, you can leave it signed into that account. You can just run it from wherever you'd like. And the only thing that happens is you have this little icon that's just floating, and you just move it somewhere out of the way until you're ready to start a poll. Now, were you able to both join now?
Yes.
Still
I
working
heard
on
one
it.
yes.
I'm still working on it, but keep going. I'll catch up.
Okay, so what I'm going to do then is we'll get to that question, and it was supposed to say spring, but it was supposed to say fall. So you can type anything you want, but I'm going to create a question now. Oh, the background, it matches the background quite nicely. I'm going to go to poll, and I'm going to choose here as an option of short answer. And I will start that poll, and you can type whatever you want in there. And where did it go? This I have not seen. I wonder if it shut down. I must have accidentally, I must have clicked exit, but I don't think I did. The videotape will show.
Oh, hey, John, so I signed up for an account, but am I supposed to download something on my?
Oh, now you should be able to join the class. And I'm not seeing iClicker here. This has
all
never
I-
happened to me before.
'Cause,
Are you
yeah.
seeing the poll? Is it active?
All I see is you've checked in. Stay on this view to remain in the class. You will be able to participate in any activities run by your instructor, but it's just nothing.
Okay, well, I've got this strange situation where it doesn't seem to be working here. And I'm going to try quitting this and restarting it. I use this every day. So I'm going to end this class session and try starting it again.
Okay. Now they did something on my screen when you ended it.
Okay.
So I'm in the right spot then.
You are in the right spot, but what's happening is I'm not seeing it. And I use this every day all through the fall semester and the spring semester. And I use this in my class. And I don't know what's different. It should have that little blue icon. I'm kind of at a loss here. It's here. Well, okay, maybe it didn't get here. Let's start it again. I'm going to start the class again. And it's back. Okay, so now at the start of class, you'd sign in, you'd have this open, and then you'd start your class or meeting or whatever you're doing. And typically you'd have your slides, Google Slides, PowerPoint slides, or whatever up. Then you would choose poll. You would specify the type of response. And this is short answer. And then you click this green button here to start the polling. And it should not go away. It should not oh, I know what happened. It went to, I have another screen connected and I wasn't looking in that direction. It went to my other screen and that's not very helpful for you. So this was my fault. I am going to go to this screen and now it will be capturing this question. And now you should see the question. It's going to be kind of ugly this time, but now you should see the option of responding.
Yes.
Is that working now?
I can see it and I can put an answer in.
And I still have a problem here. Okay. 1 second. I lost the audio because when I disconnected the other screen, it disconnected my audio. So there, now I should hear you. Sorry about that. So now, what? This is awful. Can you hear me okay?
Problems.
Okay, and now I can hear you again. What had happened is I had the TV screen in this room and it was asking me which screen I wanted to share. And that's where it was hung up. There was no problem with iClicker. It was the fact that I was looking at one screen and forgetting that the other screen had been connected because that's the first time I've been using two screens well, so far. So we have one response so far, and I'm going to bump up the time just so you can try it. So you can each try it. Just type in a response. And you notice here, it shows me how many responses have come in. And if you know that all your students have responded, you could either set it so that it counts up and you could just stop it when you get everyone. I see everyone's responded now. So I will click stop, and then we can look at the results. And basically, we got 2 responses, and you could look at it. Now, if you had a class of or a group of 30 students, 50 students, or 300 students, one of the things you could do is generate a word cloud. And you know, because there weren't too many responses, you can do this. But if you get a lot of responses and students rate more, you could see what some of the most common concerns are, or the most common issues. Or you could just look at them one by one, and then you could go through and, you know, and read them and respond to them or discuss them, as the case may be. This was set up actually as having points with people being identified, but you know, this isn't a class setup, but you could do it so it could have been anonymous, and I probably should have done that for this purpose. And then when you're done, you can just click the results and it goes back. And then so some questions about why might you use polling? And let's try this again, and we'll just try another question. And it captured the desktop, the right desktop now, not the one I was ignoring. And you don't have to say anything really meaningful here, but okay, so we've got 2 responses, so I can stop the polling once I see that everyone's checked in, and those are both really good reasons that, you know, to test to see what students understand. And the nice thing is, it not only lets you understand what students understand, it also gives students immediate feedback on what they understand. So you can put up some questions to see whether they understood what you've just talked about in class, or what they were supposed to be watching outside of class, or what they were supposed to read outside of class. Or you could see if they can apply some concepts in a given way. Or you could ask them about the reactions, how things are going for them, how things are going in the course. You could get some feedback on how things are going. And again, you have the option with any poll, with any question, of making it anonymous. And you could generate word clouds to see what some of the biggest concerns are, the most common concerns, or the most common reactions to a reading or to a video or something else that they have just watched, and so forth. So there's a lot of really good reasons for it. And one of the most important things is it breaks up what's happening in your class and lets people reflect on something. It lets them think about it, try some application, and it brings students back to focus. And it also lets them know if they're understanding things as they're moving through. And it lets you see where there's bottlenecks, where there's some, you know, where there's something getting stuck that might impede students' progress, so you can focus your time on that, allowing you to do some just-in-time teaching, focusing on the concepts or the issues that students are having the most trouble about, and not what you thought they might be having the most trouble with. So that feedback, both to students and to you, is really, really helpful. But I wanted to demonstrate just some examples of this. Now, here's a question where it says select all that apply. And this would be one which would then be a multiple answer question. So, well, it's kind of the same thing, but we'll start this polling now, allowing people to select multiple responses. And we are already actually talked about each of these to some extent, but pick whichever ones you think might apply. And we've got responses from everyone, so we can stop it, we can see. And it looks like B, C, D, and E was chosen by each of you. Choice A was chosen by one. But I would argue that probably choice A works pretty well. I didn't mean to actually advance there, but let's go back. There we go. Addressing student metacognition. Often students will read something or will listen to a lecture on something, and they'll think they understand it. And so they have a metacognitive issue that they don't really know what they've learned, what they understand and what they don't. And, this is a good way of putting a check on that so that students can check their knowledge right away and they get that immediate feedback, which might help them understand that either they do understand things better than perhaps they thought they might, or maybe they need to go back and work on something before they get behind in a concept. Because if it's a lecture class in particular, it's really easy for students to sit there and think that everything's making sense. And then they only have problems with it when they go to apply it on a written assignment or homework assignment or an exam. And this way you can constantly give them feedback on what they're understanding and what they're not. And that immediate feedback can be really helpful, particularly if it's combined with some peer discussion where they get to talk about the answers. A common approach to this type of thing, this was developed by Eric Mazur and is really widely used, is to poll people on a question. And if there is a correct answer, sometimes there's not, sometimes you're just trying to get reactions. But if there is a correct solution or a correct answer for something, you poll them, you see how they did. And actually that would have been a good use for a second screen. If you do have two screens, you could look at the results yourself to see how they responded. Since I was working in a classroom where there was only one screen, I can log in on the instructor app and see the student responses on that without displaying the results to the students in the room or the students virtually if they're out with COVID, for example. And then, so you let them try the question, then you let them discuss it amongst themselves, and then you vote on it again. So it provides that intermediate stage of some peer instruction and some peer feedback. And the correct answers will almost always rise on that second stage. And there's a lot of research that shows that that results in some pretty large increases in students' long-term recall. In fact, the use of that technique in some studies have been shown to increase the amount that students remember a year later. I haven't seen any of that go further than that, but it does seem to hold up pretty well. And in fact, here's one of the two of the earlier studies looked at the effect in chemistry and physics of using that type of polling with peer instruction. And we can do, this time we're going to do a multiple choice question. So we'll just switch to that, click poll, and now it's captured the desktop. And that's just, if you're using a mobile app, that'll be displayed on the student screen, as you probably are seeing. You don't have to get this correct.
Okay, okay.
And the way these particular studies were done is they had one class that used clickers or one group of classes that used clickers, one that didn't. And in both cases, they gave the classes a pre-test and then a post-test. And they measured the change in scores from the beginning to the end, one with clicker use and one without. And what they found actually was that it was a 200 to 300% increase in the difference in scores. So Eric Mazur found a tripling in score. Carl Wyman found a doubling in score, I believe. It may have been the other way around, but one found over a 200% increase and the other found a 300% increase. So students ended up improving the scores between the pre-test and the post-test by a factor of 2 to 3 times as many additional points when clickers were used. And that's a really dramatic difference. Now, the effects in other classes and other disciplines have not been always quite as strong as that, but I've never seen any studies that do not find at least some increase in learning. And here's an example of a numeric response. And again, you don't have to get these correct, but I'm going to change this to numeric just to show how polling can be used. And we'll start the polling. So let's suppose things are not going so well still in the fall. We have 100 student cases in the first week. If they rise by 10% each week, how many new cases would be expected 2 weeks later? So we'll start the polling. This is sort of like a compound growth type of an issue. and this is a common type of question you might ask in, in a math class or, some quantitative class, just to show how numeric responses could be used.
You're making us do math.
Well,
This is
you
why
don't
I
have to
do
get
not do
interactive,
math.
So we'll stop this. But I just wanted to illustrate how these questions could be, could be used. And we had new cases 20 and 120, and actually neither of them would be correct. It would turn out to be 121, because if it's growing by 10% a week, the second week you'd have 110, because that would be 10% growth, and the following week would be 10% added to the 110, which would be another 11. So it would be a total of 121 new cases. It's that exponential growth thing. But the main point is, and then you could talk about it because, the 20 would be okay if it was just a linear trend, but because it compounds, you get that exponential growth where you're building growth on top of growth. But that type of thing would be a good way of addressing those concepts, and how when you have things growing at a constant rate, the increase becomes larger each time because you have a larger base at the start of each new period. So, it opens up really good possibilities for correcting things and so forth as you go through the class. And you can always, now this one I would not expect anyone to be able to do outside of economics, but I want to just illustrate, this was actually a question I used in my intro class. And here what's going to happen is we're going to use a target response. And if you're using a laptop, you would just move the cursor to wherever you want and click on it. If on your phone, you would just, once it opens, you would just click on the appropriate area. And just basically click on some image, some place on the image. It's part of one of those colored areas. Either the yellow, the red, the orange, or the turquoise.
Did you say to do it again if you're on the desktop?
On a desktop, you should just be able to left click with a mouse or a touchpad.
Okay. I see.
Okay, so the responses have come in, and this is what it's going to look like. I see 2 dots and the actual area. Now, this is a small laptop I'm working in, but I can define the area here. And how do I do that? I have to select the region. I'm on a really small screen, so I'm trying to select it. There we go. So I need to select that area, and there we go. So I've selected the area where it's a red region. So I just select that now and click save, and that would automatically flag this one response as being correct and that one as being incorrect. Because once you select the area, anything within it is flagged as correct, anything outside is flagged as being incorrect. And by the way, with the earlier questions, if one of these was correct, I could just click on it and would automatically give the extra points, for the correct answer. And similarly for these, whatever they were, you can actually flag them as correct. And then students will see in their own grade book which ones they got correct and which we're not going to worry about that too much now. But it's a nice way of letting students see where they got them, where they had correct answers and incorrect, and they can go back and review that later if they'd like to.
So John, will this work in Brightspace like that?
It will work. It will work. We don't have the integration set up. In fact, very few integrations are set up throughout SUNY right yet because things got really behind, partly because of delays in the contract, but it will be. Right now, it works in Blackboard, but in the fall, it will be integrated with course grade books in Brightspace.
Nice.
So, and all your students will load directly from Brightspace, from your student rosters into here, and all their grades will automatically be, well, it's not quite automatic, but it's pretty close. Basically, you go through, you review it, you make sure you have the correct answers, and then you click upload, and then you choose which days you want to upload, and it automatically goes right into the grade book. It just takes a few seconds at the end of class. Now, here we moved last year, actually in in the fall of last year, we moved from using physical clickers to using the mobile app, iClicker Cloud. When we used to use clickers, they were these physical devices that students had to buy. And the nice thing about it is they bought it, they could buy it used for about $20 and use it for 4 years. So that was relatively inexpensive. But on the other hand, with that, students had to be in the classroom, which hasn't worked so well since we've had this pandemic. Now students could be anywhere. They could be in the physical classroom. They could be in the hospital room as long as they have the mobile app with them. They could be in another country. I had some students this spring who had some travel issues coming back from spring break, but they were still able to participate in a class over Zoom, and they could still use their mobile apps to participate in clicker questions and so forth. So, you know, we've moved entirely to this modality so students don't have to buy physical clickers. The only problem with that for some instructors is that some instructors do not want students to have laptops or mobile devices in class. And in that case, the only option would be to use the physical clickers, which means students would have to buy them. The nice thing about using iClicker Cloud is the campus is paying for it. And the cost per student is, I believe, something like $4 per student. So it's, you know, but if a student had to pay for it, it would cost $16. Well, I've got the cost coming up on the later slide, $16 for a semester. I think it's $25 for a year. And then the price goes up for longer periods. But since the campus is paying for that, it's completely free to students as long as they have a laptop or a mobile device. And it's extremely rare to find students who don't. I have a few Android tablets I bought for $50 at Walmart, and I keep them. If I'm ever in a situation where a student doesn't have a device, I can just loan it to them and they can participate with that. But it's been 4 or 5 years since that's happened. You know, students pretty much would tend to use it. And we just saw examples of each of these: multiple choice, multiple select, free response, numeric response to target. The old clickers that we used to use, and some instructors prefer still, because they don't want students to have their phones open in class, they only support multiple choice. And it's just so much easier with iClicker Cloud than before. With the old software, we had to keep it on a USB drive, bring it to the classroom, bring it back, upload the grades. And if you accidentally lost it, you lost the grades, and it got to be a bit of a problem. But this way, everything's kept in this cloud, and it's a lot easier. And we have complete integration with the Blackboard and later the Brightspace gradebook. These are the old ones. And, you know, I strongly have suggested that people not use them. You know, there's still a few people who want to, but the mobile app is just really convenient. And these are the costs if the campus stops paying for it. But so far, the campus is paying for it. But, you know, and even if students did have to pay for it, the more people that use it in classes, the less costly it is per class. So, you know, I feel really bad if a student had to pay $16 and use it only in my class. But that hasn't been the case because, again, the campus has been paying for it.
Hey, John.
Yes.
So like for me, I'm in residence life and housing. If we want to use this with the RAs, obviously they're students. Does it cost us for the professional staff to do the iClicker, or?
No,
you know,
what you would have to do, well, the only cost would be if some of the students are not using the clickers already, the campus would pay $4 for each student that uses it who did not already have an account.
Gotcha.
If they're using it in just one of their classes, it would cost the campus nothing. And the instructor accounts do not cost anything. So whoever is running the polling, you know, the RAs would get an instructor account and would use that to do the polling.
Okay.
The students would just have the student account. And again, you know, everyone in my large class uses this. Everyone in any introductory, and nearly every introductory economics class uses this. We use this in probably 85–90% of our economics classes in general. And it's used in a lot of biology classes. It's used in some stat classes. It's used in some anthropology classes. It's used in some music classes. you know, the Music 100, some of the sections use clickers, use the clicker cloud. So a lot of students use it. I think we had something like 1,600 or 1,800 student users last semester. So, you know, so it, again, as long as people are using it in one cost, there's no additional cost even to the campus of using it for it in other cases.
Gotcha.
So, and that's a really nice feature. And these are some of the differences. There is an ability to use geofencing. And the geofencing is if you want to restrict, if you're giving a poll in your class and you want to restrict people to be only the students who are in your class, so that if a student is like lying in bed in the dorm or is off campus or whatever, there is the theoretical possibility of using geofencing, and it will only accept responses that are within a certain distance of the starting point of wherever the questions are coming from. The problem is it's using the location, the I haven't tried this, but one instructor in, I believe it was chemistry, tried doing this so that students wouldn't be able to participate in it if they weren't physically in the classroom. And what happened is that a lot of students in the classroom were not showing up as being available to participate. And the reason is the location is tied to the IP address of the campus computer, which is basically the campus network, which is not very narrowly defined, because we're not, you know, it's not connecting to, if it was connected to GPS, then it might work. So if you were running your phone off for a hotspot and all the students were using their phones, then that geofencing might work. But again, you know, if you're giving questions and students are participating, I don't really care whether the students are sitting in the room or whether they're sitting on a beach in Cancun, you know, or if they're stuck on a beach because they couldn't get a flight back. And that one did sound a little suspicious, but in any case, you know, I've suggested to faculty that they don't turn that on, because if the students are participating and they're engaged and they're connecting, you know, they're there as far as, you know, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So that's an option when you set it up, but I encourage people not to use it. And this is what I've already talked about this a little before I got out of sequence. Again, the best practice suggested by Eric Mazur is do a poll, see what the responses are. You generally, you know, in terms of instructional applications, what he recommends is that you aim for roughly half of the students getting it wrong. Because if the question's too easy, if it's, you know, if 90% or more of the students get it correct, they're not going to learn very much from the activity. They might feel good about it, but they're not really learning so much. If you get less than maybe 30% or 40% of the students getting it, they're missing some basic scaffolding. But the goal is to try to find questions that are not obvious, where they're going to struggle and wrestle with it a bit, because that's where most of the learning gains occur. So you aim for questions that are going to be challenging, but ones where at least half of the students, or roughly half of the students, will get it correct. And that's where the benefits of that discussion comes in, because if half of the students get it right individually, when they discuss it, it will often go up to 75% or 80%. And then when you give them feedback later, or when they share their feedback and explanations, it reinforces the learning, and people are really open to this. Did either of you attend Eric Mazur's talk when he gave it here about 5 or 6 years ago?
No, or at least I don't remember.
Okay, well, what he did, Michelle, do you remember?
I don't remember. I might have, but I don't remember specifically.
He gave an illustration of this, and it was kind of brilliant. What he did is he gave an example, and he has his own brand of clickers now. He works with, I think it's Cengage, or no, Macmillan. But in any case, he passed out clickers to everyone, and he gave an explanation of why things expand when they're heated up. And then he said, now, suppose you have a plate of metal and there's a hole in it. You know, you cut a hole on it, and then you heat it up in an oven by 100 degrees. What happens to the size of the hole in that plate of metal? And people voted on it. And then they discussed it. And it was pretty clear that people were about 50-50 divided on it. And then they voted again. And he didn't show the results. And he said, now, if I were to lecture to you on what would happen to the size of a hole in a plate of metal when I heat it up by 100 degrees, that would be about the most boring thing I could talk to you about. And you would just sit there and you'd be bored out of your minds. But now you were arguing about it. Everyone out there was really actively engaged in thinking about this and trying to wrestle with it and thinking about why the answer might be one or the other. And he said, that's why clickers work so well. And then he went on to the next topic, and people got angry with him because he didn't tell them what the answer was. And he did, but he did that deliberately to make the point that by taking a stand and taking a position on it, everyone was engaged and wanted to know the answer in a way that they wouldn't have been if they were just more passively sitting there listening to a lecture. And that's one of the best selling points of this, that people take a stand on questions that are not obvious and they want to know if it's correct. Now, Michelle had posted a question in chat asking about Kahoot versus this. They're both useful. The advantage for Kahoot is it's a little bit more game-like, where there is a benefit where timely responses are good. I use Kahoot periodically just to break things up in classes, and I use it for students to review, and they enjoy it because it encourages automaticity, where the speed at which you respond matters, because the first responses get more points than those who take longer. And that's good if you're just testing really basic concepts, where you're just testing essentially, the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, where you're testing recall or, definitions and things. But with clickers, I tend to use them for questions where it's not so obvious what the answer is, where they have to wrestle with it a bit more. And so that's one difference, that because speed is encouraged with Kahoot, it's good for lower level questions and to developing that sort of proficiency and memorization of basic definitions. Clickers are probably better to ask more challenging questions, especially when you combine it with a sort of peer discussion. That's one thing. The other is that with Kahoot, it's virtually always anonymous. And with clickers, they can be anonymous, but it could also be graded, which gives students some incentive to come prepared to class. So if you're going to start a class, for example, by asking some questions about something the students were supposed to read, this is a way that encourages them to read, because they know they'll get more points on it if they've worked through it. Or if there's some things they were supposed to work on using some quizzing built into your textbooks and so forth, or into the OER package you're working with, the adaptive learning platform, then this is a way that encourages them to do it, because there's a benefit to coming to class prepared, because they'd like to do well on this. And it's also anonymous in the sense that no one else sees whether they get it wrong or not, but they get that feedback. And I see in chat, oh, and Kahoot is not free anymore. Yeah, it's still free up to a certain point. I have a paid account, so I'm not sure. Michelle, what do you have to pay extra for in Kahoot now? I should know, but
I think it's things like if you want to add a certain number, if you want more people in it, you have to pay for the next. I haven't looked at it for a while, but I know we were going to use it for a trivia thing and we couldn't do like teams, or there was
there is a limit on the numbers. And
so
because I was using it in a class of like up to 400, I had to pay for my own account. And it's one of those things that just renews every year, and I don't worry about it much anymore. It's just, part of those monthly expenses of things I've subscribed to in the past. But yeah, there are others. There's a program called Quizzes, which I used, which is very similar to Kahoot. And I used that because I was teaching at Duke last summer, where some of the students were in China. It was a remote synchronous course. And Kahoot was blocked by the Great Firewall, but Quizzes was not. So I switched over to that. And I don't know what the limit is on the number of users for that, but that was still free. So I don't know. But the other thing is with Kahoot, it's normally anonymous, and students don't always take things as seriously if they don't get even token points. Now, what I should note is, because the questions that most people using clickers tend to be challenging, you can assign different points for correct and incorrect responses. And in my class, what I've normally done, and I think most people in my department does this too, is we give 3 points for any answer, whether it's correct or not, and 2 additional points if they get it correct. So if they answer it correctly, they get 5 points. If they answer it incorrectly, they get 3 points. And if on average students get half of them correct, then they should end up with about 80% on any given clicker quiz, any given day of questions. And also I dropped the 5 lowest grades of scores, so they can drop 2.5 weeks of, and since my class meets twice a week, they can drop 2.5 weeks of scores if they didn't do that well. So there's a lot of forgiveness built in. Plus it's only either 10 or 15% of the grade, depending on which class it is. So any given day is just a fraction of a percent of the course grade. And probably on average, people are getting like 65% correct. So, you know, the actual score is probably an average of like 85% or so. And for most students, it brings the grade up. But knowing that they get a few more points for answering it correctly just gives a little more incentive. Plus, by doing this, you end up with, you know, really high attendance. You know, before I did this, attendance in a large class after the middle of the semester would generally drop sometimes like to 65% of the students. When clickers are being used, usually it's up to about 90% or 85 to 95% of the students on any given day. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but before a break, it may be a little lower. But again, since I've been doing it remotely or allowing students to participate remotely if they're not physically present because it's streamed over Zoom, they could do it from anywhere. And, you know, attendance then generally has been about 90% or better. So, but in any case, you can adjust the scoring so that students aren't harmed by this, but they still know there's some benefit for answering correctly, which gives them more of an incentive to think about the problems, to pay a little bit more attention to the work you asked them to do outside of class, and to stay a little bit more engaged during the class. So that's worked pretty well in general. And then you have students vote again, and then you give them the feedback. Okay, so that's all I really have in terms of concept, but let me stop the sharing here. So what questions do you have? I've been using clickers in various forms for about 13 years now, and it's worked quite well.
As for me, I was just looking for more options to engage because people think they know it all and they tune out, and they really don't. They miss what you're trying to get, even though they may be a returner. They don't know it well enough to get it not to get it wrong, but they think they do. And so just looking for another option to be able to say, well, the answer you thought it was really isn't the answer I'm looking for. And using a clicker got that versus you just assuming because I said something, it's like, oh, well, you know, she's wrong or they didn't pay attention. Whereas if they have to participate by doing this, it's more engaging.
Students find it much more pleasant, much more engaging than other techniques in class, especially in large classes, you know, because it breaks it up. And it, you know, when I have a class of 400 students, there's always some students who get distracted. They find lots of ways to distract themselves. And sometimes you'll see little pockets of side conversation getting up, which annoys the people around them. But you do a clicker question and that just stops. And then when students who may have lost focus get a question wrong, it tends to bring them back to focus, because when they're in that pure discussion stage, the volume gets really loud and everyone's discussing it. And it's a good time to walk around the class. If you happen to have TAs, which I haven't the last couple of times, but if you happen to have TAs, you could have them walk around and talk to people as they're working on the solutions. And then, you know, you could just poll again, and the students who got it right feel good about it. The students who didn't get reminded that maybe they do need to focus a little bit more, and it brings them back to focus at least for another 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can do another question. So I don't know of I only know of one person who used clickers and stopped, and I know of a couple, well, probably 3 dozen faculty who started using it and have never stopped. They've just expanded it to other classes. And I had a class my smallest class ever here. I had an econometrics class with only 9 students in it this semester, one of whom disappeared. So it was effectively 8. And I used it there because I had seen early on when I started using iClicker, there was a webinar that they put together with someone talking about using it in small classes, class of 15 or so. And, I thought of it more as a, class of 30 and up type tool. But what the instructor said, or the person using it said is, if I ask a question, even if I rotate it around, I'm only hearing from one student at a time. And I don't know if that one student is the only one who understands it, or if everyone understands it, except for that one student who's responding. And here I get to see what all students are thinking all the time. And that provides a much better read on what the students are understanding, what they're thinking, where they're getting stuck on. And it also, again, is giving students exactly that same information. So I love clickers, and most people who've used them have had a similar response.
I like it that it's come so far. I mean, there's lots, I've seen some of your presentations on clickers before, but they definitely have improved it. And
the multiple choice was really limited, but the free response is just so wonderful in terms of getting feedback from students. One other thing is that when you end a class session, you have the option of doing, we'll end this session. And I think, can you see it says end class with an exit poll? I'm not sure if that displays, it may not, it may only be the instructor who's, because I'm not sharing my screen. Let me share my screen again. I should know how to do this stuff by now. So I'm gonna not end, but so now at the end of class, I would just click end, and then it gives me the option of ending class with an exit poll. And did I click yes? I don't know if I did or not, but if I choose end class with an exit poll, it just asks people to respond, and you could tell them what to respond to. And then that becomes, you could do that at the end to get some feedback at the end of class. You could ask them to give them, respond with a question about, you could either do questions explicitly at the end of class, like an exit ticket, or you could ask them to use that. And it reminds you to at least think about doing an exit ticket at the end. So, and that's kind of nice. There's other things you can do with it. You could have quizzes that you have separately that people could take asynchronously, but those are things you could do in Blackboard or Brightspace. So there's not really much gain from it. It's mostly the real-time interaction that's valuable.
Yeah, very interesting.
yeah, it was great. I know that, we'd probably use it in some other areas too. So I like to know that it's out there. And now that it's free, that's great too.
And as long as CTS keeps paying for it, that's wonderful. And, it's much better to have the college pay $4 per student than to have students pay $16 for it. It's a quarter of the cost, and the learning gains from it are really impressive.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to end this session then. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, I'm going to shut this down and get this video rendered, and then I'll be back if you want to learn how to set it up. That's the next session.
Gotcha.